Soon, there will be no hiding place for terrorists in Nigeria. This is because the military has placed staggering 95 million naira bounty on the heads of terror commanders troubling the northern parts of the country. To boost the war against terrorism, the military published the names and pictures of 19 wanted terror commanders and pledged the sum of 5 million naira reward each to anyone who provides useful information about them that could lead to their arrest. Military authorities say the move is to encourage Nigerians to assist security agencies in intelligence gathering so that there will be no safe haven for enemies of the state. Well, joining us now is a security consultant, retired Commodore Abimbola Ayuba. Good morning. It's good to have you on the show.
Good to see you.
Thanks for having. Good morning.
Right. Let's begin from understanding this concept of, declaring a bounty on terrorists like the military has done. How does it work? And what does this even say of our effort at addressing the challenges we are facing with regards to insecurity?
Thank you very much. The concept of offering bounty, it's as old as time itself in security circles. And of course, it's a global practice, and it helps to motivate informants to actually bring out credible information that will lead to the direct arrest of the declared persons. And also, it puts pressure on the wanted persons to reconsider the idea of continuing fleeing from the hands of the law and then surrendering themselves to the authorities, and also it renders them unable to plan and organize any further terror activities while that bounty regime is on them. So it's either they are fleeing further away from their territories or hiding in other terrorist zones, which make them lose their leadership, as a matter of fact, in their own dominant area. And that begins to help their followers, to question their capacity to going to lead them in the fight, because most of the followers are already indoctrinated and deceived. So when the leader is in flight or he shows some signs of being afraid, they begin to doubt. So they eventually desert such a leader.
So it's psychological.
So it also has that impact.
I see. Now, from the list that the military released of the names and pictures of some of those alleged terrorists and all of that, it seemed to come from villages within the country, Zamfara State, Katsina State, and all of that. But recall that sometime Nigerians were told that most of these terrorists were not Nigerians, that they came from, some of the neighboring countries and all of that. Does this debunk that report or idea? Or maybe these are the ones we have, the information to give out and work against?
It is, thank you, Mike. It is sad that sometimes we don't really have very credible information on the biometrics of these people who, to my mind, even claim to be Nigerians. Because one, the porosity of our borders, the issues of integrity of documents that are supposed to, like passports and NI and all that. We see people having Nigeria's NI and passports from Chad, from Niger, and they flaunt it at whoever cares to know that they also have documents in Nigeria. So what I'm trying to say effectively is that some of the people have migrated into Nigeria, and it seems they are, because of the plethora of ungoverned spaces, they've been able to form some kind of group which now terrorize. So effectively, you will also observe that those states of Katsina, Zamfara, so they actually have share boundaries at some stretch with some of the neighboring states of the Sahel region. And of course, going back to the issue of migration also, and the porosity of our border, and then the cross-cultural affinities of border communities tend to provide them a safe haven, because of course they see each other as kith and kin. So they are able to protect, even though they know what they are doing. So that's why it appears Zamfara and Katsina, actually, and then moving down to Niger recently, we can see that the trend is to keep projecting southerly. And unless somewhere along the line drastic measures are taken to checkmate that move down south, you will continue to see cells springing up all over the place and activating themselves.
All right. Now, you recall that at some point, Kaduna State Governor mentioned that we know where these people are. And there are also some persons in some communities say where these people are is known. So why declare a bounty? That's it's not even going to achieve, its purpose at the end of the day. Why not just carry out the air raid, strike these people wherever they are? Why declare a bounty? And I'm wondering how you, or what you say to persons who believe we know this place, we know where they are. Why declare a bounty for these persons? Will it achieve the result at the end of the day? Are you confident that something will come out of it?
Sure. Something will come out of it. Even reading from open pages of newspapers and other media, people are already indicating where these terrorists have relocated to. So that itself provides some kind of geographical information on the likely hiding areas. Like most of these guys have moved towards Sokoto, and of course we know that it is just to facilitate their exit from Nigeria. And most of these places are so porous that you can't distinguish where the border is, where the borderline is, and it's so easy for them to escape. And I think also answering the question on why not go in and bomb, there's always this dilemma in military air operations about concerns about collateral damages to adjoining communities, and also knowing that most of these people are holding hostages within them, and also people that they have actually either taken by force and used as slaves within their camp. So it will appear as if they also have their own intelligence gathering mechanisms. And somehow, like as I normally want to say, there are Judases, saboteurs along this spectrum of insecurity. So they get an inkling when there will be an air raid, when there's likelihood to be an air raid, then they flee. So you don't really get them. Giving an example is this Bello Turuji, who has built an elaborate mansion for himself, but the airstrike that took down all that property never really got him, because he had already fled from that place. So, and then when you think of the cost of the explosive payloads that are delivered on these targets, it costs humongous sums of dollars. And so you won't want to go on a mission and then rain down these bombs or bomblets, and then you don't really get the target. So this leads directly to this getting more precision information And you know, it's difficult. Take the instance of the United States, for instance, you know. Then it takes a lot of time, and Osama bin Laden specifically. It's this bounty offerings that actually produced that information that led to the tracking and eventual killing of Bin Laden. So similarly, this is likely going to produce similar results. It's not 100% guarantees. But I mean, if you are able to get even 50% of them, maybe you get 60%. It's progress.
I was going to ask Commodore, recall that there was a time when, in fact, even up until recently, we still have some terrorists coming out to say they've surrendered to the authorities and they're no longer ready to fight remain in the trenches, and then they're taken in and then pass through some kind of a debrief or psychological whatever thing, and then reintegrated. In fact, the word reintegrated back into the society created some level of panic and fear in the hearts of Nigerians. But talk to us basically, how does that work? Should Nigerians rest assured when the military say, don't worry, or is there a monitoring mechanism to be sure that these people don't go back? In fact, at the point of their reintegration, they don't get more information to give back to where they're coming from.
Thank you very much, Mike. There are two sides to this conversation. And in practice, there exists the safe corridor arrangement that is primarily army-led. And that, it was like a stopgap measure to actually take on those who have not committed grievous crimes or crimes against humanity that were either exhausted or maybe they were conscripted. And then that was the original idea, you know, and it also was a product of some committee that tried to resolve issues of countering violent extremism in the country, you know. But in practice, I think there has been a lot of criticisms on the safe corridor arrangement because there's evidence that some of the so-called repentant militants or terrorists have been known to return to their old ways. And this itself raised the flag on the credibility of the entire process. Of course, in some of the works that I've been involved in the field, particularly the kind of works I did in the Northeast part of Nigeria, specifically in Borno State, which is, as we all know, is the epicenter of this terrorist thing. We have interacted with a lot of people, civil society, focused discussions with groups, and more than 95% of these people do not support the safe corridors, particularly the traditional system. Why? Because they said they were not involved initially in the planning, and they know their people better, and that returning, and the argument is that somebody couldn't have killed his mom, his dad, almost half of all his family, attrited them, and all of a sudden he's forgiven in some arrangement, and then he's giving so much packages to return home with. I made contact with a certain woman during my work over there that told us something that was very traumatic, even for us listening, that the child returned home and she asked the child, "Oh, you are still alive?" I had prayed all my life that you are killed, just as you killed your father, you killed your uncles, and then is that the kind of person that is going to reintegrate to society? So there are some fault lines in the process, because in the international approach to it is the disarmament, demobilization.
Yes.
You know, but this is not a clear conventional war. In a clear conventional war where the belligerents are known, then you can clearly demobilize. But people who are ideologically saturated with all sorts of things, and you don't also find the international actors who are specialized in this kind of disarmament, resettlement, rehabilitation and resettlement thing. And of course, we learned that there are people. I also got a brief from someone who owned 3 petrol stations before the conflict engulfed everything. It was burnt down. And then he relocated to an IDP. He became an IDP. Poor, had not to eat, only to see one of these so-called repentant returning, you know, with huge, attractive packages. They have money to spend, whereas they are victims.
Yeah.
And there have been no adequate thoughts being concentrated on the actual victims of this violent extremism and terrorism. Why do you want to focus on actors that we all know have committed all sorts of criminalities? Why are we not focusing on the victims of the women, the children? And that's another dimension entirely to it, who suffer the direct impact. And because the findings that we get from this focus group also portends some sources of future conflict in the near future, if nothing is done to focus on them right away.
When you're looking at focusing on them, talking about the victims, you know, closing these gaps that you have pointed out, how should the government address it or approach it?
Yes, it's very important. The government is actually trying. There are lots of acts that have been in place, but you know, to accept new things, we seem to have this resistance to apply new things, especially laws, where people have created fiefdoms for themselves. They tend to resist the implementation of most of this nicely done paperwork. So what must be done, therefore, is to set up teams that can actually relate directly with those victims, because the kind of psychological trauma many of them have been through, honestly, and some kids who have also left to join the bandits groups, and the idea to leave came from these effects of impact of violent extremism. Because having seen what is happening, and specifically, let me give you just one quick example. They know we have the urban herdsmen who have very peaceful, and each time there's an incident, they become the victims because they are seen, they are everyday people, and then in the process they lose their parents, they watch their parents being killed, their mothers being killed, so they eventually succumb to the idea of joining the foreign killer herdsmen, who will now tell them, revenge. Yes, say, we told you, didn't we? That you team up with us.
So it's also a part of recruiting these people.
Yes, so it's like a cycle. So as you are trying to nip a problem in the bud, you create another problem. So there's now need to have a holistic approach and which must, one, be community-based, and which also must ensure, as a matter of urgency, for it to work, we must improve on the policing aspects of the areas that the military have liberated in code. Because the military will not dominate a space in battle when there are more objectives to achieve. And of course, sadly, these people know it. So what they do is to wait. Let's wait. After 2 weeks maximum, the military will move on. Then they will return, regroup, and then deal with all those informants that have they perceive have given up out information about them.
So this that you have said, talking about informants, now that the government is talking about a bounty, with a situation like this that you have mentioned, will it encourage people to come out to speak?
Well, they are, you see, it's always among, they're saying that if you want to, all those insects that feed off vegetables actually live inside the vegetable, either the stalk or the leaves or the stem.
Somewhere.
So it means that from among themselves, one Judas will appear who is disgruntled, aggrieved, or is in desire to form his own group or get support from the state to help in the fight. And it provides an opportunity. 5 million, despite this, the value of the naira, is still some good money, especially for someone who is barely able to feed himself or his family. It's worth trying.
We have seen some heightened military operations recently in the last months. We've seen this, you know, and the military has been recording successes so far from the reports we're getting as well. But one would say, if the same military, the same space, same situation is doing this now, why didn't they do that before? If they had started this thing before, by now would have recorded more victories or would have won more battles before now. So what's the difference between what's going on now and, I believe, in fact, I remember we've had you several times on this platform, joining us from virtually and joining us in the studio, sometime 2 years ago, 1 year ago, and so on. What's the difference between that time and now?
Well, the primary thing is that we are entering into the election season. The present administration is getting to its twilight. And of course, I believe that the administration will not like to leave the situation to be as bad as it is, so that it can bequeath some kind of quasi-peaceful environment or a manageable environment for further peace to be in place. And that is one. Two, most of the equipments that have been imported, you know, sometimes it takes, we don't hardly buy off the shelf. So there is always a timeline for deliveries. So you will observe that most of those equipments are beginning to come into service and are being used right now. And of course, the other clearances, other restrictions that have been given, take the Tucanos, for instance, have been gradually, the restrictions have been eased out, knowing the Americans now know how serious this issue is, and that realizing that there's been a handshake between the terror groups and the bandit groups. So, and of course, in the last 6 months or so, when there was a debate whether they should be called terrorists, that has been resolved by the declaration that they are bandits, because anything bandits do are also acts of terror. So I think gradually the will to do more than ever before, has just emerged on the landscape.
So that's what Nigerians are seeing now.
Yes.
But then again, as laudable as this is, like you have pointed out, do you have concerns of some sort with regards to, this move by the government?
Oh, well, the only concern I will have is, the troops have taken a lot of hits in the quest to counter terrorism. And so there's need for more recruitment efforts to be made to get fresh legs to relieve those who are battle weary, because sometimes you find soldiers who have spent 2 years, whereas the book will say maximum of 6 months to 1 year. Some have spent 3 years, some have been forgotten, and have now even decided to join the bad boys or sell arms to them or sell, but when they are not being remembered, and their families, they've been cut off from meeting one another. The other concern I have is that there is need for the police and other policing actors to show up in these so-called liberated spaces and dominate them. Ungoverned spaces provide safe haven for criminals, for bandits, for criminals who have come to take refuge in Nigeria. And there's corresponding activities in the Sahel region, being most of the countries in the Sahel region, our northern neighbors, have zero tolerance for terrorism. So by the time they do that, these guys flee into our country. First of all, stay within the border communities, also benefiting from that cross-border, cultural border affinities of these people. And so if they chase them from Niger, for example, they dash into Nigeria, pull off there. When information comes that everything is good, they just walk across. So these areas, when they are better policed, then the justice system, you must not, forgiveness, yes, is in the domain of faith. And but if you have truly killed, you must be made to face the law. This domain of impunity must stop. And then there must be special arrangements for trials, expedited trials, which will make sure that within a very short period, all those people, and then when they are being held, they should be held in special facilities rather than our very porous jails that they are being broken almost into virtually
correctional centers that are not strong enough.
Yeah.
Now you mentioned. Oh, okay. Anyway, let me see. So, what do you see going forward, really, as we wrap up one way or the other? We know with the story of Afghanistan. Up until now, we cannot say Afghanistan is free of all of those things. Do you see Nigeria as being free in the next few years from all of these things for Nigeria to return to the way it used to be?
I pray so, and I hope so. Because really, you cannot compare Nigeria directly with Afghanistan. Of course, you know the hands of the countries that have been in Afghanistan over the years, historically, have been a battlefield by proxy between the U.S. and the then Soviet Union. And of course, there are this interplay, tribal interplays and all that, drug issues and being testing grounds for sophisticated weapons from the West.
All right. Yeah. Anyway, we have to leave the conversation here now, but it's been an interesting one, having this conversation with you. And it's been an interesting run all through the day.
Yeah, it's been a great morning so far.
Absolutely. We have to draw the cuttings on the program now. But we must, first of all, thank you for your time on the program, Commodore Ayuba, for coming to the studio. But then let's let you know that the views and reaction of all our resource persons are theirs and have no connection with TVC News. Thank you so much for watching.